How is it going, everybody? For those who are new joining here and may not know, I am Suris. I also have a guest on today, as you can see, and my guest today is Maura Keller. She's been a resident of Fayetteville, Georgia for about 28 years now, far longer than I've been a resident in District 14. But she is a retired lieutenant colonel and is running on the Georgia ballot right now with a campaign focused on veterans affairs reform and women's rights, including reproductive freedoms, which, of course, is something that we've had to talk about a lot on this show, more often than I'm comfortable with, especially after the disillusionment of Roe v. Wade. That all said, I want to go ahead and yield the floor real quick to Maura Keller to introduce herself, maybe give more context, introduce herself to all of you.
Wonderful. So I'm Maura Keller, and like he said, I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. I came here to Georgia in 1996 and retired in 2004. And after my retirement, I was an independent contractor for about 10 years and working on a lot of projects for either the Chief of the Army Reserve or the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness at the Pentagon. And one of the things that for me is really, really important is I'm all about truth. So when I would work on projects, I would always ask, if you're going to sanitize any of my information, any of my data, then I don't want to work on it because I want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So I did that for 10 years and I went back to school. And this time I got a degree in radiological science and nuclear medicine technologist. And I worked at various hospitals here in Atlanta for about 7 years. But my last 3.5 years was at the Atlanta VA. And having been a leader, if we see an issue, if we see a problem, we're all about fixing it. And after talking to leaders at the VA and not being able to affect change, I could have either have stayed frustrated or I could make a difference. And so I decided I'll run for Congress and I'm going to help with the VA reform.
Okay. Fair enough. So for me, my dad was a master load sergeant in the Air Force. My grandfather was also Navy, and my cousin was also Marines. So I am in a very, very military family, top and down. So I appreciate what you're doing, especially because at my local card shop, there's also a lot of players there who are veterans. And if there's one thing that I hear every week from them, it's complaints about the last time they were in the VA. Most of the time it's long wait times or having to negotiate a bunch about whether or not X or Y actually was service related, even if it happened while actually like on the clock on duty. All kinds of fun stuff that I get to hear basically every single week. So I definitely appreciate what you're doing running on that one. It means a lot for my family, and it means a lot for people who I spend every single weekend with when I'm dealing with my own mental health stuff. That all said, though, the primary thing that I wanted to say before we get into stuff, the main thing for today's stream is talking about Project 2025. I see you've got the Mandate for Leadership behind you, a physical
Yes,
copy
I do.
there. That is an unfortunate piece of literature.
It is a big book. I have gone through it. I have tabbed it and did some, the crosswalks as to how this is going to affect people.
And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on today. When I went and talked to the Democratic Party down in Douglasville, and I have none of the episodes from that are up on my channel yet. For those who are in my audience who are looking forward to that, I get to talk to Chairman Kelly, who used to be one of the politicians down in Douglasville for 4 different terms. He's one of the longest running and was one of the longest running incumbents there. Had a very wonderful conversation with him, had a very wonderful conversation with Ingrid and Robin, who do a lot of work over there. Y'all will see that on my channel in a bit. But when I was talking with them about what I wanted to do, they brought up your name because I mentioned a hiccup that was happening on my own content. So I, a few months ago, sat out to do a breakdown of Project 2025. And I'm going to be completely honest, I got to about 173 pages in before things started moving into more legalese territory, where it was harder for me to kind of envision how certain changes that were proposed by the literature would actually affect things. I believe around that time is shortly after it's done talking about the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is a lot of what's talked about in the chapter before, like page 170. And before that, up until that point, there is a lot of information about how woke America is, about how bad trans people are, about how our education system needs to be gutted. And it's very, very blatant in the early chapters. And then it starts getting into legislation proposals, and it suddenly becomes very informationally dense. And I'm a layman. This is not my area of expertise. Most of mine is dissecting euphemism. That's a lot of what I do on my channel. So, you know, when they're using euphemistic language or even direct calls, that's my bread and butter. As soon as they start talking about, here's how we need to shuffle up everybody in the DOJ, I can understand it's a bad thing because I have a red flag from anything the Heritage Foundation does. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I know exactly what's going on. And I didn't want to hip fire that to my audience. And then you were suggested, and I went, oh, I could actually bring somebody on who's far more read and researched on this than I am. That would probably benefit my audience a lot, especially those who may be very, very convinced that they don't want to go out and vote because their vote won't matter or anything like that. I kind of want to reinforce, like, no, it's very, very important that you do, because even if we stop this thing right now, the Heritage Foundation's not going to dissolve into the ether. They're going to keep putting forward proposals. They're going to keep on doing stuff. There's never going to be a point in your life where you can't stop, or you can stop.
That is true. The one thing about the Heritage Foundation is this has been around since Reagan.
Yes, the 3,000-page mandate for leadership they gave to Reagan's administration.
That's exactly it. So what they do is every 4 years they update it for the next conservative Republican president. And so Reagan was the first one to get it. And Reagan did initiate in his first year some of the requests, policies that they wanted. Now, Trump, we see him talking about, he knows nothing about it.
Yeah, he tries to deflect everything to Agenda 47 a lot. And I did want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So understanding who paid for this, and anybody who knows the Koch brothers.
Yep. Well, rip one of them.
Okay. So they are huge contributors to this. And the other one is our buddy Leonard Leo.
Okay.
And those that don't remember who Leonard Leo is, he's the person we need to thank for getting those 3 Supreme Court justices that we currently have.
Oh, so he was responsible for Amy and Kavanaugh, and
there you go.
That makes a lot of sense, because I would not expect Trump to have the forethought there, but I would expect people who do have the forethought to be leading him in those directions.
Trump will follow anybody that has money. And so these people have money. And it's a you do this for me, I do this for you. So that's how that all came. So when he's saying he knows nothing about it, when it came to his first term in office, he had roughly, I think it was like 70 people from the Heritage Foundation that were working on his transition team. And then he took 66 of them and put them in his cabinet. So that's his first crosswalk with the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation, it's a conservative think tank that's based out of Washington, D.C., and they support far-right Christian nationalist ideologies. And that's what you see throughout. You'll see the religious undertone in the project. And basically, if you're not a white male Christian, then we're not talking to you.
Yeah, they want to bring. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Innuendo Studios, but he has a very, very wonderful series called the Alt-Right Playbook, and there's a moment in there where it talks about a lot of these think tanks and who they target all of their propaganda towards, and it is almost always whoever was the most enfranchised American roughly about 50 years ago. So 50 years ago America, we're talking about the ass end of the civil rights movement. White people are now having to be more integrated with other people in society, women, people of color, and there's a lot of people who fought against that very hard. Where I live personally, and actually where you live, you would know this, Stone Mountain was where we had the third resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. We got
Mhm.
a lot of that pushback history here in Georgia, unfortunately. And so a lot of those people who their norm, they were 10, 11 years old when all of those fights kind of came to what we pretend was the head, but they've never really stopped having those fights. They grew up with that as their norm. They grew up with, oh, this sudden change happened around this time. Those people are now in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they desperately want to return to what they thought was normal. And that's a very human thing. A lot of us do want to return to whatever we considered normal in our childhood, but a lot of us don't consider, what was toxic about that normal. I have a friend who's 37 and said the exact words to me, in the 90s, we beat racism. And I just kind of stopped for a second and went, how? How?
Ah,
In what way? Like, what did we
yeah.
do? Is it because Fresh Prince was on air? Like, I don't, that wasn't beating racism, but okay.
No,
Um,
no.
so the Heritage Foundation, from my understanding, does most of their work to try to target that demographic of people who feel like they're disenfranchised now because the society around them has progressed past the ideals that they grew up with, without them considering just how caustic those ideals were.
That's it. That is so true. When you talk about the normalization, being in the military, we're all trying to work together.
Hmm.
And the issue is you got people coming in from all walks of life thinking that how they grew up was the normal, and that anybody else who has a thought or a different way of looking at things, that's not true, that's not right. And so trying to take a collective group of people and trying to get them together and understand each other, and that it's not wrong, it's not right, it's just this is who we are, and we try to work together. That's a hard job, trying to get all those different ideologies to work together. And what we have here, are people that have never left the comfort of their own home,
Hmm.
or their state. And so anything that we talk when we talk about progress, that's not norm to them.
I think there's I've talked about this a bit on my channel before, and maybe you could speak to it a little bit. It feels to me like people tend to be more caustic towards progressive ideas in rural areas, but people who tend to be in places that are more population dense, where they've basically been forced to interact with their fellow American 24/7, suddenly they become a lot more warm to progressive ideals because it's all around them. It's normalized to them now.
And that is so true. Because as I walk around and I'm knocking on doors in the rural areas, because I got a lot of rural area in my
Hmm.
district, I've got 15 counties, and much of it is rural. And um, to listen to them, you got a lot of racism, and you got a lot of homophobic people,
Yep.
and that's what I would see in some of those areas.
I feel like there's a lot of people, especially in online audiences, who they think of the rural American almost as their enemy. They've grown up maybe with homophobic parents, maybe with very religious zealot parents or people around them. I know for me, I grew up going to Pensacola Christian Academy. Like I was actually taught in my
Ayo,
school
party people.
I was actually taught in my school to not like gay people, like as a thing that was in my curriculum. So I feel like there's a lot of people who think that people in rural areas that, in my opinion, simply don't know any better. They're Americans that grew up with a very narrow view of the world around them, and they operate within that way. How do you think we get people on our side to look at those people as people who need to be reached out to, as opposed to people who need to be feared?
We got a lot of work to do, especially think about when Obama was running.
Hmm.
Nobody, especially in the South, thought that we would ever have a black president. And when that happened, that really opened the floodgates of racism. When Trump was
The
running,
birther movement.
the birther movement, Trump was somebody that was instigating a lot of that. Um, and it just, when he got elected, it just opened the floodgates where people, especially because Trump was leading the charge, that it was like okay to be out in the open to be like that. And as we've seen since then to now, we've seen it doesn't just stop at Black people or women or gays. It's now contributing to anybody that is in the immigrant community. If
We're seeing a
you
lot of that towards the Haitian refugees right now
Haitian,
who are legally here.
yes, yes. And then you look and you know, going from how he had his Muslim ban and how that caused so much problems. But that's what we see. Again, if you're not that white male, then everything else is woke. And we've got to find a way to be able to target that.
You have to find a way to be able to break through that ceiling of, I mean, in psychology, you'd call it a schema. Like that schema of what a woke person is, and you just have to go, no, that's not a woke person, that's a person. That's a person who lives life and puts their pants on just like you. They don't wake up scheming how they can take away the next white actor in your favorite book adaptation movie. Like, that's not what they're doing.
No, not at all. And you know, like in the military, you've got people that are now coming out saying, "Oh, it's the military has now become woke." And when you try to look at some of what they're
what does that even mean?
Do you know? Actually, some of them are talking about women being in the military is woke. Gays in the military.
Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro actually have been going on record multiple times. And they are two of the largest political pundits. Like, they're not Tucker Carlson big because they're not associated with a giant news network like Fox back when he was, but they are still some of the largest ones on the internet. They have multiple episodes dedicated solely to saying women should never be in the military, women should not have those opportunities. And that that hits me on two levels. On the one level, it's sexist against women because why would you take away that opportunity? Especially when right now the best healthcare opportunities are in the military. The best opportunities for career advancement by going to college are in the military because you get access to the GI Bill. But as a guy, I feel like it's also terribly sexist towards me because it's saying only I should have to go and die for our country. Only I should have to go and put my life on the line when we all have the same American blood. If, like, for instance, if a draft were to happen tomorrow, I feel like only half the population being forced to go into that draft would be terribly unfair. Sexism's a thing that cuts both ways. And I don't think that people like Matt Walsh consider that. Or if they consider it, they just don't care. They care about being cruel. But that's a very biased opinion on my part.
No, and I'm looking at one of the comments, and it's Jay's a proxy. And she said, you know, her mom was in the Air Force during the time of Reagan. And was the military woke then? The military was never woke. It was progressive. You think about Vietnam, or even go beyond, go back to the world wars. When men went to war, it was women that had to step up and run. They had to run.
They became the factory workers.
They became, exactly. And some of them ended up learning to be a pilot because they had to transport parts and pieces to wherever in the world to be able to make sure it was there for the service members for what they needed. But then when the war is over, women go back into the background, and we're kind of forgotten. So I came in 1978, and I was one of the first co-ed groups to go through. I was the last of the WACs. And the military still didn't know what to do with us, how to integrate us. You know, they just had been over time integrating Blacks in the military. Before, Blacks had their own units. They never worked together. Now they do. Then they started integrating the women, where women no longer trained just by themselves. And we have made good progress, but we have now got people involved where they're trying to take it away. Back in when I got promoted to major, I was walking down the hallway, and I had a guy say, hey, congratulations on your promotion. But we had probably a lot of men that didn't get promoted because we have to promote so many women and so many blacks.
Mm-hmm.
And because they felt affirmative action was taking away deserved promotions from the white men. And that was hard, because again, after being in the military as long as I was, there's still that misogyny. Even today, there's still that misogyny.
So it's still very, very concerning that we have to deal with that even now, when there are people who have had entire generations grow up in the military in an environment that is fully integrated. Like
Mm-hmm.
their life from beginning to end has been one where they've had a mother in the military. And some people now have a grandmother who's been in the military, and there are people who are trying to pull that back. It's one of the reasons why I feel like there's many people who think that conservatives are not conservatives anymore, they are regressives. Once upon a time, their job may have been to ease the flow of progress so that things did not get stumbled into without there being good reason to. Nowadays it feels more like their job is to claw things back, and I think that's a lot of what Project 2025 does aim to do. So I do want to ask the question, what
Sure.
got you involved in investigating and researching Project 2025 primarily? I know that, again, Trump has done a lot of deflection saying that, oh, our job is Agenda 27, but the Heritage Foundation does release these documents every 4 years. So what got you involved in researching it this time around?
It was women's reproductive rights, women's reproductive health.
So the fall of
Because
Roe was the catalyst.
the fall of Roe, and then I just heard about Project 2025, and I said, I got to look into this. And one of the things that they said in there's a part of the book, and it says, we have got to remove from every document, legislation, grant, that anything that deals with reproductive rights, reproductive health, reproductive freedom, it must be stricken from that. And I
Isn't
thought,
there a whole area in there? Because I think I covered this one before, where it seems like the strategy is to say that reproductive health is not actually medical care.
that's
And
exactly right.
so if they strike it from the record a billion times, they can then say, post hoc, well, it's not medical care. For you see, it's not in any of the medical books.
Right. So, I mean, that part, that just the reproductive health care has so many tentacles to it in other departments within that book. So we talk about, they'll say that abortion is not health care. And then in other parts of the book, you'll see where we will take away aid from any country that agrees to abortion care. It could be in any
So
other
it's the
country,
same. It's like when we pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, but
which
but
was one.
infinitely bigger.
But when you just mentioned that, thank you. Because when Trump was in office, his first year, he was given, I think it was 300, uh, don't quote me, it's either 332 or I'm sorry, it's 334. He was given 334 policies that they wanted enacted or repealed by the Heritage Foundation. And in his first year, he executed 64% of them.
That's
And the thing,
very close to what Reagan did at the end of his tenure. He was like
which
two-thirds of them
that
by the end of his
that's
tenure.
it. And so one of the ones was for us to get pulled out of the climate one more time, Paris Climate Accord. And and they wanted us to go and start drilling on federal lands. So he did exactly what they wanted him to do. And so can you imagine what it will be for this administration, if he goes ahead and he initiates everything, and which he will.
Because
He will.
he would just be taking even more of those. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, was to talk about and give context for some of the chapters and the different things that they're trying to legislatively change for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of damage Trump can do in a small amount of time, because executive orders are one of the things that he did a ton of in his first 100 days in office. And every executive order, yes, technically can be undone by the next president, but if the next president is having to spend every single hour of their first 100 days in office undoing everything that Trump did instead of enacting the plans that they want to do, that makes it harder for that Democrat to run in the following election cycle. It makes it way harder for them too.
It does. First of all, Trump hated Obama. And he was going to do anything and everything he could to repeal, whether it was good or bad for the people. He wanted just to repeal it all because
he wanted to get rid of the ACA very, very vehemently.
Everything. And then, you know, you look at what he's done. They have such a huge amount of climate and science deniers. And we see where everything is going. And we just saw what happened with
the
Helene.
Recent hurricane blew through, and it's destroyed tons. My Twitter feed is filled with creator friends of mine who have had to evacuate, have had to leave their homes, or are just terrified because they're dealing with something that was several times the size of Hurricane Katrina, and that leveled an entire city.
So you look between that, you look at the wildfires that we have because of unseasonably dry weather, no rain. You look at the crops. We now have, it's going to be trillions of dollars that we're going to need in order to help the farmers, in order to help with the wildfires, in order to help with the devastation that just happened. You know, with Helene, to rebuild communities. So we have got to finally get the right people in place so we can start doing the right thing for, you know, the climate change.
And instead you get some people from our, like, for instance, the person who's representative of my district saying that it's space lasers that were controlled by a certain populace of people, and those are what started California wildfires. And then later,
Jewish space lasers. And,
yes. Later on today, after our conversation is concluded, I actually am going to be deep diving a little bit into her most recent claims, which is they can control the weather. She's not very specific on who they is. And she's not very specific on how weather gets controlled, but she does say it's via lasers somehow. And it confuses me.
Well, she has this thing, this really thing. I don't know if it's a fetish when it comes to lasers, because I was back in March, I was in Congress walking down the hallways, and I had to go to where her office was. And she's got a huge poster on the wall, and it's for how to handle immigration. So you got a moat. Okay. And you got alligators. You got alligators in the moat, and I don't know if they got bombs.
Does she think she's a medieval lord or something?
I don't know, but I think they got maybe bombs on the backs of the alligators. Then they've got they look like Star Wars type ships, spacecraft up in the air.
It's like Star Destroyers up there.
And then she's got soldiers with guns and lasers, and so she's very big into lasers.
It feels like she just wants a modern day Nazi Germany. Like it feels a little bit like that, and I don't want to pin that on her, and I don't want to pin that opinion on you, because that would not be fair. But I, as somebody who lives in her district and has to see the signs from her constituents everywhere I drive here, it's much. It's very, very much. Though, ideally, we might be able to oust her soon, because we have elections that are coming up for our representatives soon, and
I say Sean Harris is the one to come and vote for.
I would hope so. This I think Marcus Flowers managed 27% of the vote last time versus her, which was nowhere near enough, but certainly more than you'd expect in a very red district like 14. So I'm hoping that momentum can maybe get spilled over a little more. I'm going to see what I can do to try to help with that this time around. That's as a content creator.
Beautiful.
That said, with the Heritage Foundation, can you maybe illuminate for my audience a little bit? Oh, hold on. I just did that. One sec. All right, technical hiccups aside, where we were,
Uh-huh.
I wanted to ask if you could tell my audience a little bit about the Heritage Foundation themselves. We know that they're a conservative think tank, but
Hmm.
what does that really entail? What is their, like, the people who were on their payroll, what does their day-to-day generally look like in terms of what things they try to get implemented, and how do they go about that?
Well, for this particular one that we're looking at for this version of the Mandate for Leadership Project 2025 is a lot of people that were in his last administration. They're the authors of it. And so we're looking at here are some names. We've got Christopher Miller, who was part of the DOD. We had Ken Cuccinelli from the Department of Homeland Security, Ben Carson from the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Mandy Ganesakara she was one of the deputies now. She's writing the EPA.
Mhm.
So you've got Peter Navarro for trade. So you've got people
You've
that
got
were
all
in
people
his.
who were in Trump's admin who are
That's
the
it, and
authors of this.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's very hard for Trump to distance himself from this in any meaningful way when his previous cabinet was filled with them, and his current cabinet, the people that he keeps talking about putting in office when he gets hired, if he gets hired, are a lot of, if not the same names, people from the same organization.
Right. And so when you look at the one of the big things for the Mandate for Leadership, if you look at went to the actual page, there's a section in there where you can upload your resume,
Mhm.
because what they're trying to do is vet everybody, make sure that they're in place. So on day one, they know the people that are going to be the loyalists for him, and they can put them right into the positions.
I know that the big thing for the Mandate for Leadership, and I've talked about it a bit on my channel, but the biggest thing is they want to take people who were previously careered experts in areas of political office, remove them, and replace them with loyalists. Could you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Right. So you're looking at, they're saying about 50,000 of them that
About
they could.
about 50,000 of
Yeah, I
our.
want to make sure my numbers were right, but I think it was about 50,000 of them that are careerists.
Mhm.
Um, but many of them, see, they are not, they're leaders, but they are not um, political positions. And what he wants to do is to remove them and make them political positions.
So,
But
for
when he
instance, if
hires,
oh, sorry, you go on. I'm sorry.
no, and sometimes some of the positions, it's got to go to Congress for approval for some of these positions. There's not going to be a requirement for that to happen.
So the
He's going to
agenda
make
is
sure
to cut the bureaucratic red tape that typically keeps those as professional positions, and instead put lackeys in.
that's it. So some of the key positions when we're looking at that are not they're not political positions. Let's look at the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, the Office of the General Counsel, Foreign Policy, Department of Justice. All of them will now be political positions. So that allows him, being Trump, to go ahead and say, you do this, you do that. There is no oversight. There is no checks and balances anymore. He pretty much is going to run everything.
But it won't look like he runs everything to the layman. They're going to say, well, yeah, that's just what democracy does. They're not going to be looking at the 50,000 positions that all got shuffled up under his admin, because those aren't going to be things that most people pay attention to in the first place.
That's right. That's right.
So that
And it's
that
going to look, and in some cases, it might look like the government is actually functioning better, but it's really not, because they're just doing what they are told.
so instead of so as of right now, as an example, a lot of people would criticize the United States government for being a very slow moving mechanism.
Mhm.
Progress tends to be slow within it. Whenever you get even a new presidential administration, seeing actual change from the admin may take about 2 years. And when it comes to the economy, sometimes there's a buffer of 4 years for any policies that come in for that to actually start making impacts in people's lives afterwards. So what you're going to get from what you're describing seems to be people seeing things run faster, but not necessarily better. Things aren't more efficient, it's just things are running impulsively.
That's exactly right.
That's terrifying.
That
That's
should be.
incredibly terrifying, especially if there are people working in healthcare, especially if there are people
Yes.
who are working in benefits departments, especially if there are
Yes.
people who are working in city planning, places that need those cogs to move slowly because you need 15 experts to come in and do checks and do balances and go, no, you can't put a beam there. That's not structurally sound. No, the sewer lines can't run there. We have vehicles of a certain tonnage that have to go over that concrete. You need experts in those areas that are slowing down the immediate impulsive run, because if you don't, you get things like bridge collapses. You get things like playgrounds that aren't safe because there's freaking heavy metals a few feet under them that aren't being taken care of. You get all kinds of really nasty things when things like just a city planning department runs too quickly.
Well, what you just said, one of the things right now the Trump administration is so happy about is that they talk about deregulation. And they, again, always go back to the Obama administration, how for every, which I have not been able to validate this number yet, okay? But they'll say for every eight, for every one we do, we got rid of eight. When I went to look at, well, what did you get rid of? Remember all the train derailments we had?
I remember us having supply line issues as a result of it.
Well, but remember when we had some trains that derailed
Mm.
and they had all the chemicals that spilled everywhere?
Yeah, it
Like
was a big
I
thing in the
don't
news cycle for like 3 weeks.
right. And we didn't know what was happening to the air quality, if the people were going to be in any type of danger, how it was might if it leaches into the water, whatever it is. Those what happened found out that rules that were in place were removed. And that's why you saw some of this.
So
So
wait,
what happens is
trains literally got derailed as a direct result of deregulation.
right, and there were and you can go look it up and it will identify the areas. Like remember they talked about two people that should be on the train um, to run it.
Mm.
They repealed that, and so it went through all the different things and that are for safety reasons. And what happens is when you take that away, it sometimes puts more money back into the pockets of the corporations
Yeah, if you
and
have to hire
businesses.
3 or 4 fewer staff members to keep an area safe, you end up saving on the salaries of them by maybe 200,000 a year.
Yep.
But
Or you don't need to purchase stuff
yeah,
that is required. And so you're putting more money in them.
proper hazmat equipment in certain areas, stuff like that.
Okay, okay. Or maybe what we had a reason that you had to buy steel at this type of structure or this type of concrete. And now it's like, nah, you can buy anything. So
I
it's a different grade. And there's a reason why we had those in place. Those will be taken away. And so the safety, people are saying, oh, we do the deregulation because we're getting rid of the bureaucracy and it's going to be better for the people. And you cannot prove that to me at all. It ends up the safety, the people run into the safety issues, but the corporations, remember, these are the people that lobby, that have PACs, that go after the Congress people and
I've
expect favors.
I've done lobbying at the Georgia Capitol before, so I've seen how many people you get across the rope line just constantly in the ears of our representatives, in the ears of our senators, trying to get them to get pulled one way or another. I feel for anybody who's in a lobbying position, who's not a corporate lobbyer, because it is a thankless ass job. But at the same time, corporate lobbies being able to say, "Hey, we want to save $1.3 million this year on labor. Can you help us out?" It feels gross and wrong, but from what you're telling me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to steel man this, but from what you're telling me, it seems like this would be a way to circumvent a lot of the need for that lobbying, because if you already have loyalists in these places where they can enact change at these different areas of government, you don't need to have the ear of a politician where you go, hey, this is a thing we need, I'm going to tell you why we need this in our corporation. You can just have somebody go up to Trump, as many people have done, like Elon Musk recently, sucking up to Trump and going, hey, I want to save $2 million on labor. What if $1 million of that made it into your pocket?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
that's a terrifying reality.
Yeah.
That is a very, very scary thing
Well,
to try to envision.
remember, there will be no guardrails.
There's a common word or a common phrase that's spoken a lot in unions, and that's that regulations are written in blood. Somebody died, and therefore a new regulation had to be written. Somebody got hurt, and so a new regulation had to be written. It feels like erasing that is to ignore the actual human cost that went into every one of those rules that were written, because every one of them, I guarantee you, was not put on the books when each of those industries started. They were almost all, like in the railway industry, you would get regulations put in because a derailment happened, or because somebody's car got stuck on railway tracks because you had the metal too high, and now suddenly it was a death trap depending on the rise of the vehicle. Those are things that you can't skimp on later because, oh, we're gonna get rid of some of the red tape. Like, no, people have died as a direct
Right.
result of not having these rules in place. I know that there's a lot of people in America who are incredibly xenophobic towards, say, Chinese people, especially after COVID. We saw a lot of that. And a lot of these same people would scoff at the structural integrity of buildings in China. We see a lot of content about the tofu concrete that comes from there, where it's very easy to kind of reach your hand and start peeling away layers and layers and layers. It's not very structurally sound. There's a lot of collapses. These people who scoff at those kind of structures are also seem to be directly voting for a president that wants to get us to that stage too. That thing that they really don't like already.
Uh, very, very true.
So, out of curiosity, also, I say that Mightiest Gwyn just rated. Thank you for coming in. For those who are new here, we do have a guest on right now. This is Maura Keller. She is running in Georgia's District 3, and she is a very, very studied expert on Project 2025. And a lot of the cause and effect of Project 2025 is what we are talking about today. So, thank you for coming in. I just wanted to let you guys have an update on what we were doing as of right now. So, I know that you mentioned the cost cutting that Project 2025 is going to try to give towards several corporations. And I know that Trump specifically has said that he wants to axe a lot of government programs, consolidate a lot of government programs. What major organizations do you think would be gutted in the new regime? What ones does Project
Oh
2025
my
talk about
God.
a lot?
Let's just talk about the Department of Education,
That's a huge one.
gone. The Environmental Protection Agency, plus NOAA, NOAA, which is necessary for what tracked Helene, the national atmospheric. So that would be totally gone. Look at they'll diminish the FDA.
Oh
I
boy,
mean, just
I can't wait for foods to have infinitely more carcinogens. That would be
there,
great, wouldn't it?
absolutely. You know what I'm saying? It makes absolutely no sense. We're not taking care of the American people, and that's what we've got to make sure. Why he cannot be in office and his minions cannot be in office. We've got to find a way to get ourselves back on track where we can work across the aisle for bipartisanship, and really never lose sight of the focus, which is about the people. And if everybody cared about the people in their district, we as a whole can continue with this American experiment. And right now, the American experiment is ready to be to be dust
It's ready to
if he
implode
gets in. Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
we have organizations that are desperately trying to get people elected so that we don't have to have any more elections. I mean, that's something that Trump even said himself, whether he meant it in full truth or he meant it as a snide remark. It's still a terrifying remark for any politician to make about any office, literally ever. So there was a question that was asked in the audience by Sean Helfen. Said my question is about how badly is the deportation going to affect the population? As in, going back 3 generations, I know I'm on the schedule list either way because born in Canada, even though I have Native American blood, which already they know they don't recognize, especially that one senator that just said go back to where you came from, to a Native American. That was in Idaho. That was in Idaho. Sorry, not everything goes back to Ohio.
Uh-huh.
That was in Idaho. I actually am going to be talking about that a little later today. But that question was for you, Maura?
Wow. Okay. So deportation is one of Trump's biggest pieces right now. We all know and we've heard what he's talked about the Haitians, even though it was deemed untrue, not, I mean, just untrue, period, that JD Vance has actually said he made it up.
Yeah, he said if he needs to make it up for people to pay attention to him, he will, which is what a 3-year-old says.
Okay. And look at what he did. Trump and all, again, and his minions, they will now double down, triple down, quadruple down. He has said he will do a mass deportations. We talk about, we have the Haitians, certain groups, we have a couple of types of Venezuelans, Cubans. They're on those temporary protected status. That I'm not sure the date that's supposed to expire, and then they can go ahead and extend it if they need to. But it doesn't matter. He wants them gone. My biggest concern also is about the DACAs. We have so many of them that all we do is we just kind of push them down the road and make them a political talking point every 2 years that there's an election.
Mm-hmm.
And we have got to finally give them their pathway to citizenship.
I know there's plenty of people who have dads, for instance, who've been stuck in legal paperwork for 10 or 15 years, who've been married in the United States that long. Yep. And there's anxiety every single couple of years over, is this when I'm going to be able to be an American citizen? Is this when I'm going to be able to be an American citizen? Is this when I'm getting taken away?
Mm-hmm. Under the Trump administration, you will be going away because you are going to be part of the mass deportation. Go into a country you don't know anything about, never have been. And so we have got to make sure that we give them that, put it to bed finally. Every 2 years, they did the right thing. They filled out the paperwork that was necessary under the Obama administration. Every 2 years, they have to pay something high $600, low $700 to renew their status. And in some cases, because of the bureaucracy, don't have enough people working on these projects in those agencies, that means some of their jobs that they're at won't allow them to work until their new status is identified.
But at that point, what are they supposed to do? Just sit there and starve? No, everybody's living paycheck to paycheck right now.
That's what's happening. We've seen that has happened. And so they just try to make sure they have extra money set aside for this time of the year. So when they can't go back to work, that they can actually subside. And so,
which is insane to have to do that. That's inhumane.
If we gave them the status that they deserve, their pathway to citizenship, we can take all the people that are running the DACA and put them on the border or put them back into other elements of immigration. So there's a way, I'm sure there's a cost savings right there.
And yet, instead, despite the fact that, for instance, even people who are here and are not fully legal immigrants yet don't account for anywhere near the amount of crime as regular citizens tend to do, we still get a ton of propaganda about how, oh no, these people are bringing in crime, they're bringing in horrific things. But then it's almost like correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like almost an attempt to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you can financially cripple somebody, how many options do you leave them with to survive?
Right. And, you've got Republicans out there that have said, if you get rid of even the illegal immigrants, because 45% of them are dealing with we're dealing with agriculture, they're dealing with the service industries, and they deal with construction. it would cripple our economy. And people are saying, oh, they're getting all these benefits. They
Not
get
really.
no benefits. The only thing that they actually get is emergency Medicaid if they are like, such a dire medical emergency. They can request some assistance. But other than that, they get nothing. But one of the Republicans was saying it would actually cripple our our world economy because we rely on them for those parts of our industry.
It feels like a lot of the proposals in Project 2025 are done to look like something is being done more efficiently, look like something's being done more correctly, sound like they're being done more correctly, but basically everything just sounds catastrophic. It just sounds like something that was cooked up by, I don't know, a bunch of people who didn't actually have established tenure in any type of education in their field and instead just wanted a bunch of talking points, almost like the same kind of loyalists that are supposed to be put into those industries in the first place, which feels dystopian.
So when we talk about Project 2025 and them, they try to distance themselves and say Trump has nothing to do with it. I've had people tell me, I'm fear mongering and things like that. I'm spreading lies and rumors. Then they talk about Project 47.
Yeah, the Agenda 47 is usually what gets deflected to there.
Okay, Agenda 47. But also my opponent that I'm running against, what he talks about is America first. You'll hear Trump talk about America first. So if you go out and you start looking up America First, find the America First Committee. It is a crosswalk of Project 2025. It's just like maybe a 2-page per chapter, very broad brush stroke. But if you read it, and if you had any knowledge of Project 2025, it's there.
So it feels like it's just a smokescreen at that point. It's a way for someone to technically say they didn't do it. As an example, if somebody says, "Well, I technically didn't hit you," and you go, "Well, no, but you slammed a baseball bat into my face. I didn't hit you. The baseball bat hit you." It feels like a lot like that. Is they can have that one degree of separation despite being wholly connected to it.
Yeah.
They can pretend it wasn't them, it wasn't their agenda. And what happens when those people get elected? What happens when our incumbent Republican decides to, put his boots on and go forward with everything in Project 2025 at the local level as far as he can? What happens to our citizens then? Because that's a scary thought of deny, 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 deny. Oh, the election year is over? Execute.
The bottom line is if my opponent talks about the America First, we must give Trump an America First Congress, then everything that we've seen to start to be put in place, like remember they denied Project 2025, yet we see the repeal of Roe v. Wade. We saw the removal of affirmative action in DEI. Those are all elements that were already in Project 2025, and they just initiated them earlier. So we're seeing people's rights being taken away, and it's almost like it's a legal way now for bigotry, for racism.
That brings me to another point. So you brought up America First.
Mm-hmm.
How many connections do you think there are right now between the current America First movement and the original America First committee from back in World War II?
I have not done a crosswalk between that yet.
Okay.
But what I'm seeing now is because I see how it ties into Project 2025. I would be very, very concerned because we're now looking at they can talk and say whatever it is they want. Right now, they're running scared. They're going to say and do whatever they can to try to win an election. And up to this point, if they've said we're looking at a national abortion ban, now they want to change that. It's like, nah, we're not going to do a national abortion ban. And yeah, I really want everybody to be able to have IVF if they need it. We know if they get into office, those are going to be
they're
taken.
Gonna start gutting those programs, or at the
They
very
will.
least put in the first bits of gutting them so that that wheel can move slow enough that they can say, well, that wasn't my fault. And which is also scary, because then you get people who can defend them, and it sounds like they have a platform to stand on, defending those politicians that put in those things. Like when somebody says, for instance, I've had this argument before, Donald Trump didn't get rid of abortion. What are you talking about? Well, no, but he definitely appointed the Supreme Court justices that presided over the decision on Roe. And that was entirely him. And Mitch McConnell definitely stonewalled Obama's appointee with the argument that, oh, well, you're a lame duck president right now, so I'm not going to even consider your position. And then that didn't happen when Trump was not yet guaranteed to be the president of the United States. That double standard was there. Yes, we can say the Republican Party did this. Yes, we can say Trump did this. That 1 degree of separation doesn't make it magically not their fault.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So I know that there's a lot of changes that are proposed for the Department of Defense in the Project 2025 document. And I know with you having a military background, that might be something that you could give me more information on that I personally wouldn't have as much context for.
When it comes to that, let's talk about like for the VA.
Mm-hmm.
They want to privatize it. And the VA, to me, should not be privatized.
No, that's a right that's earned by American veterans. And
Right.
those rights will never be, those rights can't really be guaranteed under any kind of private label, because a private label is going to try to get their bottom dollar as opposed to trying to do right by the veterans who are there. That feels dirty.
It does. Trump wanted to privatize it. Again, it goes to his buddies, it goes to his friends, it goes to those big corporations and businesses. It's all about making money. And what veterans go through, especially at times of war, no one is totally going to understand what they went through. And going to, an outside doctor
Who doesn't have any context for what.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't have any understanding as to what they went through. And in some cases, I've heard from veterans that have gone and talked to like those people on the outside, and it's almost like they were being dismissed. And when we are an organization that has a high suicide rate,
Mm-hmm.
we can't afford them to walk away thinking nobody's listening to me, nobody cares.
Yeah, because when you have only a few, when you feel like you've only got 5 options and slowly some of them start getting eliminated, nobody wants to feel like they only have the one option left. Nobody wants that to be their retirement plan. Nobody wants that to be their medical plan. Like, I couldn't solve it any other way. And we already deal with a rising suicide rate in the United States right now. We already deal with a lower mortality rate now than we had even 15 years ago, which should not be the case. As our medicines improve, as our understanding of certain mental health issues improve, those numbers should go up. We should see the suicidality go down. We should see our mortality go up. But we don't see that.
When you talk about that, when we've had gun safety, and we've had mental health, you hear a lot about that. When I look at the Georgia Republicans that are in Congress, all the Republicans voted no when it comes to mental health. We want schools to have more mental health. We want mental health individuals available for like the police, for de-escalating.
Instead of having a police officer have to do all of those jobs themselves.
Right. And so all of those were voted no. And we have such a significant shortfall when it comes to mental health. And what you were talking about also, women with mortality rate, we have, especially Black women in Georgia, have such a high mortality rate in childbirth. But just understand, in my district alone, out of the 15 counties, I have 6 counties that don't have OBGYN care.
I heard you mention that on a previous interview. Could you explain kind of how that even happens in the first place?
Well, remember, Georgia has the heartbeat bill.
Yes.
So after 6 weeks, that's it. Doctors, well, okay, so not every pregnancy ends in a birth. There's a lot of women that will miscarry during the pregnancy. A lot of women can be put in harm's way where they may have to terminate a pregnancy. And because of Georgia's law, they won't be able to do that. So doctors don't want to go to jail. They don't want to lose their license, and they don't want to have to pay a hefty fine. They're going to go err on the side of caution, which is to do nothing. And as you know, we had 2 women that recently died. That was considered preventable death. And you just think about it. When we, especially women, when women saw that Roe v. Wade got overturned, we just knew that deaths for women were predictable. It was just a matter of time as to when it was going to happen. And we have seen that where women were so close to possibly dying due to sepsis, due to they have to be on death's door.
I've heard stories of doctors turning women away with the argument that we need you to be sicker. We need you to be in more pain, otherwise we can't do it.
Now think about this. When they were trying to make the determination, well, how sick is sick? And so say there's a lot of complications that a woman can go through when she's pregnant. Say, for instance, she can be diabetic, but it only seems to go away after she gives birth, but she can be diabetic. If it's severe enough, she could lose her eyesight. But eyesight is not death, so that's okay. Hypertension is another one. So your kidneys deal with hypertension. So if you have to lose a kidney, that's okay, because you still can live with one kidney.
They care more about the idea of you giving birth to the baby than about your body's integrity.
That's exactly right. You can still live without an extremity, a body part, and that is inhumane. No woman should have to live a less life because her state wants her to give birth.
It's very, very close to just forcing women to breed. It's like a couple steps left away, but they're very small baby steps, and that's terrifying.
Well, again, Project 2025 believes that this is what it's all about. And when they talk with, so say some women, they need, they want to start a family and they go a surrogacy. They're saying, no, it has to be between the original man and woman.
So what happens?
So they're looking at getting rid of surrogacy. We've seen what's happening with IVF. Now, remember, IVF isn't just about somebody having difficulty having a family. They may want, okay, somebody could be getting ready to have chemo, and whether it be a man or a female, they want to be able to, put their sperm away or put their eggs away, because later on they may be able to, once they've gone through all the treatment. But if they go through the treatment, there's a good chance that their eggs or sperm will be gone forever. At that point. So they will not be able to do that. And then there's been some discussion. I just was with Tammy Duckworth a couple of days ago, and we were discussing for women veterans, but it's also for male veterans. You never know what's going to happen when you go over to war. You could be losing body parts over there. You could lose your reproductive system
due to whether it's exposed to radiation, depending on the environment you're in.
That's exactly it. So there was some talk about being able to to store your eggs or your sperm as you go over there in case something happens. And the people that are fighting against that is just unbelievable.
It feels insane to, at one point, say that, oh, we need to force women to give birth because we need to increase the amount of babies that are in the United States. And then on the same flip side, when other options are given, like, here's all these options that can be used so that people can give birth on their own terms, they go, no, 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 we don't want it that way. Not that way. No, none of it's that way. We don't want them to do it those ways. Those are wrong. It's kind of, I hate to keep using the word disgusting or using the word terrifying, using the word dystopian, but it feels a lot like it's that. And it's, the other terrifying part of it is that there are voters who don't know that these are things that are being fought for under their nose, and they may be very well intentioned in going, well, no, I just care about the economy a lot, so I'm going to vote for the Republican Party. And then you look at all of this fallout that happens from that and go, well, I'm trying to convince you that all of this is the economy and everything else, and that vote may not actually be in your best interest.
When we talk about the economy, you know, you look and the history is there. It's not through what the news is saying. The economists will tell you, and every Democratic president has inherited a debt that has and they have attempted to bring it down. And in many cases, they didn't bring it down to zero, except, you know, we had a surplus under Clinton. And when Bush came in, he said, you know, I think we're taxing people too much, and decided he's going to take that away. And then here we go. Now the deficit has started. Under the Trump administration, you know, they were so happy talking about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I remember when Trump got behind the microphone and says, you know what, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. And that was when they took businesses from 36% tax rate to 21%. And then another Republican senator got up there and he said, and you know what, this is going to be great for the American people because of the trickle down effect.
That thing that Reagan tried to say would happen that never happened.
That's exact. And it didn't happen under Trump administration. The only thing that it did was add an additional $2 trillion to the debt. And we saw corporations make insane amounts of profit. We've seen stockholders make insane amounts of the benefit for owning stocks. We saw the leadership of companies get huge amounts of bonuses. But when I talk to people, I say, well, so how much money did you get for a bonus this year? Oh, I got 50 cents. Oh, I got 75 cents extra an hour. There was no trickle down effect.
Yeah, something that's not even keeping up with inflation has gone down in the last few months compared to what it was about a year ago, which is certainly good for the Harrison Biden administration. But as of right now, there is nobody, with the exception of a very few industries, whose wages are actually keeping up with the cost of living. I want to say in my district, anything under about 22 an hour doesn't cover all of your expenses right now. You have to make cuts somewhere.
Because I was looking at a study done by Mercer University here in Georgia, and it will tell you it's roughly about $22 an hour.
Yeah.
But think about it. Georgia is $5.15 an hour. They have no desire to change it.
Yeah, we are stuck with the federal minimum wage, and the federal minimum wage is also not enough.
$7.25. And, you know, when I go out and talk, I had bought a big box of cereal, and it was the mega size. It was over $7. And when I opened up the box and I took the bag out and I put the bag right beside the box, the bag is half full.
Yep, we have shrinkflation happening too, and it's not just it's not just that the inflation rate in general is astronomical. It's that the goods and services that we are receiving are not of the quality that they were about 10 years ago. They are not
No.
of the amount that they were about 10 years ago. There's several threads you can find, and I may actually do a video on this. Now that you've mentioned it, it's given me the idea to do a video on this, of all of the different products that have had these cost-cutting measures in them. Even something like shoes. Even like your basic Walmart brand shoes that could last for a decently long time, now the foam that the soles are made out of doesn't seem like it has the same structural integrity as it used to. It's easier to peel it away. It's made of a rubber composite that isn't anywhere near as strong or durable. So if you're using those as your work shoes, suddenly they start, disappearing out of your cabinet very quickly and getting replaced. I've talked about Boots' theory of economics before on my channel, if you've heard of that concept before. But it's the very easy, if you have to buy a very expensive pair of boots, they last you 3 years. They cost you $80. If you buy a cheap pair of boots you have to get rid of in 3 months, they cost you $20. Which one is actually more expensive?
Right.
And yet it seems like that $20 pair of boots is getting more and more bad. It's getting worse and worse every single year. It's getting, our food products are getting worse and worse every single year. Different additives being added to them, making them less and less appealing, maybe more appealing to the palate if you can inject them with enough sugar. But at that point, then you start getting into the obesity epidemic in the United States and how our industries are contributing to that. It's a rabbit hole, and I apologize for going down the rabbit hole.
No, but that is so true, and that's like on my radar. Things don't happen in a vacuum.
No, they don't.
Things that start, they have a domino effect, and you got to follow where they're falling, and that's what I've been doing. And it's like we've got so many things that we have got to turn back. And again, it's almost like, where do you start? Because we've had too many people that did not care.
No, they just care about getting elected in the next election cycle.
That's it. And that's one thing with me. One of the things is I'm not a polished candidate. I am not an orator. I don't say things nice and flowery. I tell you exactly the way it is, because I am not going to tell you something that's not true, because I have to look at you. I have to look at you in the eyes. And I'm not going to being in the military, I'm not going to take my integrity, my character, those aren't for sale. And I am definitely people over party. Mm-hmm. If it's the right thing to do for the people of this district, because remember, that's why I'm there. I'm supposed to listen. I'm supposed to understand, advocate, and elevate their voice. I'm their voice, and they're behind me, telling me what to do. And I think that has gotten lost by the people up there. It's all about them and the power that they amass in the news cycle, news bites that they get. And that's not who I am. I've received all the news and accolades and awards that I don't need to amass anything. I just have to wake up with a purpose, and that is listening to the folks in the district and then getting the work done. Because too many times what I'm seeing right now, they're looking for solutions to problems that don't exist.
Because they sound good.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds good to say that you're working on X, Y, and Z, but it's the equivalent of your boss coming in and asking you what you're doing, so you start typing faster on a blank notepad document. It looks like you're doing something, like when in, like you mentioned in Project 2025, when they talk about getting rid of the FDA. If you get rid of the Food and Drug Administration, yeah, that's going to lower the cost of a lot of your food. Yes, it may seem like you're fixing the inflation problem, but now your cost of medical is going up, because you are now having to go to the hospital for food poisoning more often. You are now having to handle additives that are in your food that just shouldn't have been there in the first place, that wouldn't have made them fit for human consumption. And these are things that normally we don't have to take into consideration, and we're having to take them into consideration more and more if something like the FDA gets gutted. How do you find safe food when all of that is gone? And you can't say, "Oh, I'll just go to my local farmers." There are fewer and fewer of those every single month. You're not going to be able to do that all the time. I could go out and hunt deer. I can do that right now, and I could supplement my meat a little bit with that, but I don't want to rely on that all the time. I don't want that to be the only staple in my diet so that I can, live safely.
Mm-hmm.
So I do know that we are about 15 minutes before when I want to wrap up, and
Okay.
I can wrap up a little sooner if you need me to. We had the technical hiccup in the middle that kind of ate a little bit of the time away. So where are you at right now in terms of time?
If I might have to leave because I'm preparing for my debate prep.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Timothy was
on
mentioning that.
Sunday.
Awesome. Then how about we only do maybe less than 5 minutes so that I'm not eating
Okay,
into
that's
that
fine.
time anywhere near as much.
No
Um,
problem.
then as a final thing, there are a couple of other questions I had in here that I wanted to get to, like stuff on the Department of Energy, the way that that's being changed. But I'll focus on two things as the last
Hmm.
ones.
Sure.
One, Donald Trump has shown himself to be, I think it's probably safe to say, an enemy of legacy media. Chapter
Yeah.
8 of Project 2025 speaks broadly about changes that should be made to both how legacy media is allowed to operate, corporate legacy media, and how the presidential administration deals with that media. Could you maybe go into details a little bit about what the Heritage Foundation wants to do there?
Can you imagine not having having OAN and Fox News as your only sourced media?
I have
That
friends
he
who only listen to them, so I know what that looks like.
see he they will get to dictate what they can and cannot say. And it's just look at just and this is no lie. Take a look at Russian media. You go outside the lines, you're gone. You look at what they're talking about. He's already
We saw a lot of that
identified.
with RT.
You look at the names he has provided, the shows he has provided that he thinks that they need to be arrested and put in jail. And what country does something like that? Russia, China, North Korea. Look at Orban.
The countries that we classically tried to define ourselves against, not in the same league as.
And these are the ones he looks at for affirmation. Um, it's like I like this about Kim Jong Un, and I like that about Xi, and I like this about Putin, and that is who he's going to meld himself into and be the strong man. And what he doesn't understand, especially when it comes to Putin, is he's a former KBG agent and he knows exactly how to manipulate him. And he has yet to realize how much he's been manipulated.
Because he's got an ego that's the size of Trump Tower.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I would love to stay on this topic for a while, but we don't have the time. So the
Okay.
last thing that I wanted to say is, you are also running on affordable housing for
Mm-hmm.
veterans. So two quick things before you go.
Sure.
What changes in the VA, what changes in our government do you want to try to fight for that can help with getting veterans affordable housing? They are one of the largest homeless populations in the United States right now, which is not what we should have for our veterans at all. Anybody you're sending to war should definitely not have to deal with homelessness. And then on top of that, there's an entire chapter on the way the Heritage Foundation wants to gut the housing and urban development section of
Yeah.
our government. So can you illuminate both of those for me with the time that we have
We
left?
we got to find ways to be innovative outside the box. And we've got a lot of people that have that entrepreneurial spirit and can figure stuff out, how to repurpose current housing, how to repurpose, like we've got people that talk about repurposing like the Conex boxes and things that you can do to be able to create some shelter for the veterans or the homeless people. And when we talk about for the Veterans Administration, we've got the homelessness, and I just say just the hospital itself. We should be the Chick-fil-A of all hospitals, and we are not even close. when it comes to, again, the housing, just for people in general, we have older folks that want to be able to downsize, and we have young folks that would love to be able to not have to pay a mortgage for their rent, that be able to have a place by themselves. So the people are talking about are the tiny homes, and because it's a great to downsize into, and those for something as a starter where they can build equity into it. But we've got builders that are saying, I don't make enough money building tiny home communities. I make more money when I build single family homes.
I actually
So
have a
we have
friend
got
in
to,
construction that just had to take a secondary job at FedEx because he's actively not making enough building homes at all right now.
so that's one of the things. Let's look at more renewable products that can be used for homes. We talk about concrete. We talk about timber, but there are other things that we could possibly be using that's more cost effective, more climate friendly, and where they can actually make some money. Me being in Congress, I hold the purse strings. So how can I make it where everybody gets to participate in this? They can make money, but now I'm not looking for like an insane amount, but I'm just saying they can be profitable, but people get what they want. It's almost like in some cases, it's like the people are here for me, when in reality, the industry, are supposed to be there for the people. And so we need to make sure that we don't lose focus, that we give the folks what they need and what they want. And we've got a lot of entrepreneurial spirit out there. I mean, just look at the high school. When you look at some of these science Olympiads, these kids come up with stuff I would never even think about. And then they win awards, and then companies look at them and they're like, we want to buy that from you. We want to start doing that. And this is our younger generation that is coming up with this. They are smart. They can think outside the box. That's what I want to be able to foster with them, that come up with your ideas and suggestions, because it can only make us better.
Okay. I think that would definitely be an improvement over the current situation where we have people who experience these very, very illuminating careers in high school of everybody saying, oh, this is an amazing idea. This is great. Why don't you go get hired at this firm? And then they end up working at a fast food restaurant afterwards because our industry is currently not built to innovate. Our current industry is built to stagnate right now. Well, that all said, I did want to go ahead and thank you for all of your time. I know that we went a little over thanks to the technical hiccup there.
No
but
problem.
That all said, any other final words that you want to go ahead and give to my audience? And also just a reminder, this is Maura Keller. She's running for Georgia District 3 against an incumbent Republican. And that is the southwest of Atlanta is where a lot of those districts are. So that is an area that I could actually drive to very easily right now. So this is something that means a lot to me.
To me right now is making everybody understand how important their vote is and how important their voice is. For all the people that I talk to that say their voice doesn't matter, their vote doesn't matter, I cannot tell you how. Do not believe that, especially in my district when the media keeps saying it's too red, it's heavily Republican, a Democrat cannot win. Don't believe that, because when I look at the numbers of the people that did not vote, if they had come out to vote, it would have been game over election cycles ago. For all those people that if they could only understand the power of their collective voice, of what a difference it would actually make, I want them to walk away with that this is a very important election. And please, cast the vote. If you have a friend or family that's like, nah, maybe next time, the answer is now. You've got to come out because too much is at stake. You see Project 2025. If you're a female, you're at stake. If you're Black, brown, you're at stake. If you're a naturalized citizen, even though you look different, you're at stake. I can't let anybody lose their rights or lose their livelihood because of who they are. Everybody has to be protected. Everybody has a part in the democracy, and we cannot have our democracy die. This is an experiment. Everybody needs to be part of this experiment. We have countries that are looking at us and hoping that we will fail. And if we get Donald Trump into office, this experiment will fail.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you being out here. I appreciate helping get everything scheduled in here. And even though I couldn't get through everything I wanted to, what we did get have time. We could. The stuff that we were able to get into detail, I appreciate that. That said, what time is your debate on Sunday before you head out?
So it is. It'll be 2 to 2:30. It's going to be the Loudermilk debate. So it'll be, I think, broadcast the next day. I think it's streaming live on Georgia Public Broadcasting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's for a full 30 minutes.
Okay. For anybody who might be local who's in my audience, is that something that they're able to watch live at an actual event, or is this something that will just have to be from behind a screen?
Behind a screen. There is no audience.
Gotcha. It is just get it done, put it out there, and then it is there. Well, again,
hope for the best.
Hope for the best. Well, again, thank you very, very much for being here. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck on your debate.
Thank you so very much. You have a good night.
Will do.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so, so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.